The hospital in Manhattan shimmered under sterile lights, its marble floors reflecting the wealth embedded in every wall. Outside, the city roared with life, but inside, time seemed to slow. Graham Wexler, 42, stood by the window of a private room, his tailored suit still perfectly pressed despite the late hour. His jaw was clenched, gray eyes fixed on the city skyline, the very skyline he had helped shape as CEO of Wexler Tech. But tonight, none of it mattered. Behind him on a small bed surrounded by monitors lay his daughter, Lily. 10 years old with curly brown hair spilling over the pillow, she looked smaller than ever. Her legs, tucked beneath a thin blanket, hadn't moved in months. Not since the accident, a car crash during a trip Graham wasn't there for. He had been in Singapore closing a major deal when the phone rang. "Mr. Wexler, it's your daughter. She's alive, but not whole." The best doctors in the country, 14 of them, flown in from Boston, London, Tokyo, all said the same thing. The spinal damage is permanent. She will never walk again. Graham had thrown money at the problem, millions, as if money could rewrite fate. But it couldn't. He tore his eyes from the window, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. Lily was awake, staring at the ceiling, her small hands clutching a stuffed bunny. She had spoken little since the accident, and when she did, her words carried a weight that pierced him. "Daddy, why didn't you come?" she had once asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hadn't answered. What could he say? That he chose a boardroom over her? "Lily," he said gently, "do you need anything?" She didn't look at him. "No." He swallowed hard, throat tight. He wanted to sit beside her, to hold her hand, but the distance between them felt like a chasm. He had built an empire, and couldn't even reach his own daughter. The door opened, and a nurse entered, checking the monitors with practiced ease. "She's stable, Mr. Wexler. You should get some rest." Rest. He hadn't slept well in weeks. "I'll stay," he said firmly. The nurse nodded and quietly left, the door closing with a soft click. Graham sank into the leather chair by the bed, loosening his tie. The room was quiet except for the low hum of machines. He closed his eyes, but guilt gnawed at him. If he had been there, if he had driven her himself, if he hadn't left her with the nanny. The if-onlys were sharper than any failed deal. A soft sound broke his thoughts, the steady swish of a mop on tile. He opened his eyes. In the hallway through the glass door, a young woman was mopping the floor. She moved quietly, deliberately, her black hair tied back, her navy uniform simple but clean. She looked to be in her late 20s, her face calm, yet filled with purpose. Graham barely noticed her at first. Janitors were usually invisible in places like this. But something made him glance back. Maybe it was the way she paused, glancing toward the door as if she could see through it. He shook his head, brushing the thought away. Just a worker, doing her job. He leaned back, rubbing his temples when her shadow passed the glass again. She was closer now, wiping the doorframe. Her movements were oddly precise, her hands steady, almost intentional. Then she stopped. Her eyes met his through the glass, and for a moment, Graham felt a jolt. Like she didn't just see him, but everything he carried. The pain, the failure, the burden of having everything and yet nothing at all. She stepped inside, leaving the mop in the hall. Graham straightened, his brow furrowed. "Can I help you?" His voice was sharp, the same one he used to silence boardrooms. She didn't flinch. Her eyes held steady, her voice light but clear, with a slight accent he couldn't place. "Sir," she said, "I can help your daughter walk again." The words hung in the air, impossible, absurd. Graham stared at her, mind reeling. A janitor in a hospital filled with the world's top doctors, daring to make a promise no one else had. He opened his mouth, ready to call security, to dismiss her, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the certainty in her voice, or the unwavering steadiness in her eyes. He turned fully toward her, eyes locked, and froze. "You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, Don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Graham Wexler sat in his makeshift office at the hospital, the glow of his laptop screen casting sharp shadows across his face, highlighting lines money couldn't erase. The janitor's words from the night before still echoed in his mind. I can help your daughter walk again. Absurd, ridiculous. Yet her eyes, Amara Lynn, as her name tag had read, held something that refused to be dismissed. Not hope, but something colder. Certainty. He let out a dry laugh, mocking himself. A billionaire, the man behind an entire tech empire, shaken by the promise of a janitor? He had met enough scammers to recognize the scent of desperation miles away. But Amara hadn't asked for anything. She simply spoke, and then returned to mopping the floor like she'd just reported the weather. Graham typed, pulling up the hospital personnel file he'd requested from the director that morning. Amara Lynn, 27th Asian American, employed for over a year. Nothing stood out, no degrees, no commendations, just another janitor. But he couldn't forget the way she'd stood there, her voice calm yet weighted, like she knew something the 14 best doctors in the world had somehow missed. He closed the laptop and stood. It was time to visit Lily. But instead of heading straight to his daughter's room, he found himself slowing in the corridor, scanning the night shift staff. He wanted to see her again, just to make sure she wasn't insane. The hospital hallway was cold, thick with the stench of antiseptic. Graham paused when he heard a soft voice from a nearby room. The door was slightly ajar, and inside he saw Amara, not in her janitor's uniform, but in a plain white coat, sitting beside an elderly man. The man, clearly in his 80s, struggled to lift his trembling arm. Amara held it gently, her voice steady and kind. Slowly now, Mr. Henry. Don't think about your arm. Think about reaching for your granddaughter. Picture her face. Graham frowned. What was she doing? The old man gave a faint smile and his arm lifted slightly before giving in to fatigue. Amara gently patted his shoulder and scribbled something in a small notebook. No tablet, no patient chart, just presence. He watched her for days silently, like an investor assessing a volatile opportunity. Amara was everywhere in the hospital, not just mopping floors, but pausing beside patients others ignored. One afternoon, he saw her with a little girl around 8, her spine twisted with scoliosis, sobbing from pain. Amara massaged the child's shoulders, her fingers moving with the precision of a concert pianist. Breathe in, Emma. Breathe out. Pain is like a wave. Don't fight it. Let it pass. The girl calmed, even smiled. Graham dug deeper. No medical credentials, no licensing records. But a contact at Columbia University confirmed. Amara Lynn had once been a top neuroscience student, leading her class, predicted to be the youngest doctor in New York State. Then she vanished, dropping out before her doctorate. No reasons, no explanations. Curiosity turned to obsession. Graham began watching how she worked, not with machines or medicine, but with her hands and words. She used techniques he'd never seen. Massage mixed with breathing exercises, sometimes just the right words at the right moment. Once he heard her whisper to a patient, "Your body knows how to heal. You just need to remind it." On the 4th night, Graham couldn't take it anymore. He waited for Amara near the supply room where she usually stored her equipment. When she appeared, pushing her cleaning cart, he stepped forward. "Miss Lynn," he called out, his voice slicing through the quiet. She stopped, not surprised. "Mr. Wexler," she said, her gaze calm. "You said you could help my daughter," he began, cutting straight to the point. "Why should I believe you? You're not a doctor. You're just—" He hesitated. The word janitor caught in his throat. Amara didn't flinch at the implied insult. She set the mop aside and crossed her arms. "I'm not a doctor," she said, "but I understand the body. I've studied it, lived with it, and I see things doctors overlook. Your daughter hasn't lost her chance. No one's just believed in it yet." Graham stared at her. Her words were simple yet carried the weight of someone who had tasted failure and refused to stay down. He wanted to dismiss her, to scoff at her arrogance, but he couldn't. Not when Lily still sat in that chair, her eyes hollow every time he entered the room. "Do you have proof?" he asked, his voice ice cold. Have you helped anyone like her? Amara tilted her head, considering. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. Mr. Henry, room 304, 70% arm function recovered post-stroke. Emma, room 112-40% spine pain reduction after 3 weeks. I don't have a lab or a license, but I have results. Graham looked down. Handwritten notes, crude diagrams drawn in pen. It didn't look like a doctor's file, but it looked, real. Too real. He inhaled deeply, feeling like he was on the edge of a massive decision. What do you want? He asked. Money? Fame? Amara gave a faint smile, the first trace of emotion he'd seen on her face. I want to help the girl, she said. That's all. Graham was silent for a long time. At last he nodded. 1 week, he said. You have 1 week to prove yourself. If you fail, you leave. If you succeed... He trailed off, afraid to hope aloud. Amara didn't answer right away. She looked at him, as if reading a book he didn't know he had written. Then she nodded. 1 week, she said. But not for you, for Lily. She turned, pushing the cart back down the corridor, leaving Graham standing there, his heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker. Not hope, but possibility. A fragile one. But enough to send him back to Lily's room with lighter steps. The physical therapy room on the hospital's 5th floor was spacious but cold, its white walls and large windows looking out over towering Manhattan skyscrapers. A treatment bed sat in the center of the room, surrounded by assistive equipment, parallel bars, harnesses, and a control panel with buttons Graham hadn't bothered to understand. Lily sat in her wheelchair, wide brown eyes cast downward, her stuffed bunny resting on her lap. She didn't speak when Amara entered, only glanced at her briefly before turning away, as if even hoping hurt too much. Graham stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes sharp as he watched Amara's every move. He had given her a week, but deep down, he still expected her to fail. Not because he wanted her to, but because he was used to broken promises. Yet Amara didn't have the exaggerated confidence of the previous doctors. She wore a plain gray t-shirt, simple jeans, her hair tied up high, and carried a small cloth bag instead of a clipboard or tablet. She knelt before Lily, lowering herself to eye level. Hi, Lily, Amara said, her voice gentle but not patronizing. I'm Amara. Today we're going to do something kind of fun, okay? Lily didn't respond, only clutched the stuffed bunny tighter. Graham's throat tightened. She used to be a whirlwind, running, laughing, filling the house with life. Now she was a shadow, and he had no idea how to bring her back. Amara didn't push. She opened her bag and took out a small blue rubber ball and a board with concentric circles drawn on it. We'll start simple, she said. I want you to try thinking about touching your toes. You don't have to move them. Just think about it. Can you try? Lily frowned, her voice barely a whisper. I can't. My legs don't listen. Amara smiled, unshaken. They're still there, Lily. They're just asleep. I'm going to help you wake them up, little by little. She placed a hand on Lily's knee, her fingers moving gently, massaging with precise pressure. Inhale, exhale, feel my hand. Don't think about your legs. Just think about your breath. Graham leaned in slightly, trying to see better. He didn't understand what Amara was doing. No machines, no drugs, just touch and words. But Lily, hesitant at first, began to breathe in rhythm with Amara's voice. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Amara moved into small exercises, asking Lily to imagine her toes moving, then to focus on sensations in her ankles. No miracles, no dramatic breakthroughs. But when Amara placed the rubber ball under Lily's foot and asked her to press gently, Graham saw her big toe twitch. He held his breath, heart pounding. Had he imagined it? He stepped forward, voice tense. What are you doing? I saw her toe move. Amara didn't look up, still focused on Lily. Great job, Lily. You did it. Let's take a little break. She stood and turned to Graham, her gaze calm. That wasn't a miracle, Mr. Wexler. That was the nervous system. Lily's body still has connections. They're just weak. I'm helping her remember how to send signals. Graham wanted to ask more, but Lily looked up, her voice trembling. I, I felt something, like pins and needles. She looked at Amara, light flickering in her eyes for the first time. Can you really do it? Amara knelt again, taking Lily's hand. Not me, Lily. You. I'm just showing you the path. The session lasted an hour, and by the end, Lily could slowly rotate her ankle. Just a few millimeters, but it was real. Graham couldn't take his eyes off her. He wanted to believe, but part of him still feared. Feared that this was another illusion, that hope would shatter again. In the days that followed, Amara came every morning, bringing a patience that flowed like a river. She combined massage with guided breathing, sometimes telling stories to help Lily relax. Once upon a time, there was a bird with a broken wing, she would begin, and Lily, silent at first, gradually began asking questions. Graham realized Amara wasn't just healing a body, she was healing a soul. On the fifth night, Graham stayed late at the hospital, reviewing footage from a security camera he'd asked to access. He saw Amara after hours, sitting alone in the storage room, speaking into a small voice recorder. Her voice came through, tired but steady. Day 5 with Lily. Good progress, but still slow. I have to succeed, not just for her, but for my own past. Graham paused the video, his chest heavy. Her past? What was Amara hiding? He had checked her records, but they were just fragments. A medical prodigy, then gone. He felt a creeping unease. Who was this woman? Why would someone walk away from a future in surgery to push a mop? He shut off the monitor, stood, and made his way to Lily's room. She was asleep, a faint smile on her face, for the first time in months. Graham sat beside her, held her hand, guilt and hope crashing together inside him. He didn't know who Amara truly was, or if she could really keep her promise. But for the first time, he didn't feel alone in the fight. Out in the hallway, Amara pushed her cleaning cart, her gaze drifting past Lily's door. She paused for a second, then moved on, as if she already knew the journey had only just begun. The dim glow of the hospital corridor lights cast long shadows across Graham Wexler's face as he sat in his temporary office, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. It was long past midnight, but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. The tiny movements from Lily, her curling toe, the faint twitch of her ankle, had ignited a fragile flame of hope inside him. And with that hope came unease. Amara Lynn, the girl with the miraculous hands, was becoming a puzzle he couldn't ignore. The voice recording he had overheard the night before haunted him still. I have to succeed, not just for her, but for my own past. What past? Why would someone with her evident talent choose to work as a janitor in a hospital instead of standing in an operating room? Graham wasn't a man who relied on gut instinct, but the instincts that made him a billionaire CEO told him Amara was hiding something, and he needed to know what before placing his daughter's future in her hands. He opened his laptop and fired off a short message to his most trusted assistant, David. Find everything on Amara Lynn, background, education, any scandals. I need it today. David didn't ask why. He never did. Graham shut the computer and walked down the hall toward Lily's room. She was asleep, breathing softly, her stuffed bunny nestled in her arms. He sat beside her, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her chest, his heart heavy. If Amara failed, could Lily survive another heartbreak? The next morning, David arrived at the hospital with a brown envelope. Graham led him into a small meeting room and closed the door. Talk, he ordered, voice low but sharp. David opened the envelope and pulled out a thin stack of documents. Amara Lynn, 27, born in Queens, New York. Mother was a Chinese immigrant. Father unknown. She was a true prodigy. Graduated high school at 15, attended Columbia University for neuroscience, top of her class, invited to join a doctoral research program at 22, expected to become the youngest licensed physician in New York. He paused, sliding a sheet across the table. Then everything collapsed. Graham frowned and picked it up. It was an old newspaper clipping from a local paper, headlines stark and cold. Medical student implicated in patient death. He skimmed the article, heart pounding. 5 years ago, Amara had been assisting in a spinal surgery at St. Luke's Hospital when a 17-year-old patient died. The surgery failed, the family sued, and Amara's internship credentials were revoked. She dropped out shortly afterward, vanished from the medical field. Blood rushed to Graham's head. "Why haven't I heard of this?" he demanded, voice tight. David shrugged. The incident was buried quickly. The hospital paid a large settlement to the family. The media didn't dig deeper. But here's the interesting part. He handed over another document, this one stamped with the Wexler Tech logo. St. Luke's was part of your investment portfolio at the time. Wexler Tech's legal team handled the case, made sure Amara Lynn's name never made national headlines. Graham froze as if punched in the chest. He remembered that year, 2019, the start of Wexler Tech's expansion into healthcare. He had signed dozens of contracts, left everything to legal. He had never heard of Amara, never read the case, but somewhere his signature had helped erase her. He slumped into a chair, fingers trembling around the report. Amara, the woman who was now helping his daughter, had lost everything because of a mistake his company had covered up. "Anything else?" he croaked. David shook his head. "She's kept a low profile ever since. Worked janitorial jobs at a few places before this. No marriage, no debt, no social media, like she wanted to disappear." Graham nodded and waved him off. Alone again, he stared at the folder. He wanted to confront Amara, demand the truth about that surgery. But part of him was afraid. Afraid she'd admit she wasn't good enough. Afraid that Lily's hope was built on a lie. That afternoon, he made his way to the therapy room. Amara was working with Lily, dressed in her usual gray t-shirt and pants, her hair tied high. She was coaching Lily to lift her heel. "Good, Lily," Amara said gently. "Pretend you're reaching for an apple on a high branch." Lily smiled, a rare, beautiful smile, and her heel lifted a few millimeters. Graham stood in the doorway, watching without entering. He realized that Amara had never once mentioned her past, never asked for anything but a chance to help Lily. She must have seen the Wexler Tech logo on the hospital equipment. She must have known, but she had said nothing, no resentment, no demands. After the session, as a nurse wheeled Lily back to her room, Graham stopped Amara in the hallway. "Miss Lynn," he called out, his voice colder than he intended. She turned, her gaze steady. "Mr. Wexler." He inhaled, trying to keep his tone level. "I know about St. Luke's, the surgery. Why didn't you tell me?" Her face didn't change, but he saw her fingers tighten around her cloth bag. "Because it doesn't matter," she said softly. "I'm not here to tell old stories. I'm here to help your daughter." "Doesn't matter?" Graham stepped closer, voice rising. "You were accused of killing someone. I need to know if I can trust you with Lily." Amara met his eyes, her gaze sharper than ever. "You want the truth?" "I didn't kill that patient. I was just the nearest scapegoat when everything went wrong. They needed someone to blame, and I was the easiest choice." She paused, then added, her voice low but firm, "But I'm not here to clear my name. I'm here for Lily. If you don't trust me, send me away, but don't take her hope from her." Graham said nothing. Her words cut deep, because he knew she wasn't wrong. He wanted to trust her, but the fear of failure and the guilt of what he might have done to her life held him back. Amara turned to leave, but before she walked away, she said quietly, "I don't need you to know my name, Mr. Wexler. I just need you to let me do my job." She walked off, leaving Graham standing there, clutching an invisible folder in his mind. He watched her disappear down the hall, feeling like he had just touched a truth deeper than anything he'd uncovered. And for the first time, he wondered, was Amara not just saving Lily, but saving him too? Graham Wexler's footsteps echoed sharply against the hospital's marble floor, each step a blow to his chest. He had just left a meeting with the hospital board, where he received the gut punch. Amara Lynn was suspended, effective immediately. The reason? A formal complaint filed by Dr. Paul Carver accusing her of unauthorized treatment and endangering patient safety. Graham's fists clenched at his sides, fury pulsing through him. He knew Carver, an arrogant man he'd denied research funding 2 years ago. This wasn't about medicine. This was revenge. Only hours earlier, Graham had witnessed something miraculous. Lily had stood up, for the first time. She hadn't walked, but she had stood, gripping the parallel bars, sweat beading on her forehead. Amara, in her usual gray t-shirt and slacks, knelt beside her, steady and calm. "Lily, you did it," she said. "Look at me. You're stronger than you think." Lily had smiled, bright and radiant, a smile Graham hadn't seen since before the accident. He'd turned away, hiding tears he hadn't known were still there. For the first time in months, he felt something he thought he'd lost. Hope. Now that hope was being torn apart. Graham stormed into the therapy room, where Amara was quietly packing up her things. Her cloth bag sat on the table, a few therapy balls and her worn notebook neatly stacked. She didn't look up when he entered, but her shoulders tensed, as if she already knew what was coming. "Miss Lynn," he rasped, "what's going on?" Amara paused, then turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, but he saw a small crack in her usual composure. "You've heard, haven't you?" she said softly, not as a question. "They're removing me. I'm not allowed near Lily anymore." Graham took a step closer, voice rising. "I'll speak to them. This is my hospital, my money. They can't do this." Amara shook her head, a faint, sad smile brushing her lips. "You could buy the whole world, Mr. Wexler, but you can't buy their trust. Carver leaked the story. The press is already outside. Janitor cons billionaire. That's your headline." Graham froze. He hadn't anticipated that. The media, always circling like vultures, had turned their sights not on him or Wexler Tech, but on Amara. On a janitor who dared to challenge the medical elite. And he knew, once the headlines started flying, truth would no longer matter. "Carver claims you broke protocol," Graham said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "He says you don't have a license, that you're dangerous. I need to know, Amara. Are you doing something wrong?" Amara met his eyes, hers as sharp as glass. "You still don't trust me, do you?" she said. She stepped forward, her voice low but powerful. "No, I don't have a license, but I know what I'm doing. Lily stood today not because of machines or medicine, but because I believed in her, and she believed in me. If you want to believe Carver, go ahead, but you'll be throwing away your daughter's chance." Her words hit him like a slap. Graham wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He remembered Lily's smile, her trembling voice, the joy in her eyes when she looked at Amara. He remembered that notebook, pages filled with careful observations. But he also remembered St. Luke's, the death, the lawsuit, and the fear of putting Lily in the wrong hands. Before he could speak, the door swung open. A hospital security guard entered, followed by Director Margaret Hensley. "Miss Lynn," Hensley said coldly, "you need to leave immediately. If not, we'll have to call the police." Amara didn't argue. She picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and looked at Graham one last time. "Tell Lily I'm sorry," she whispered, "and that she's stronger than anyone thinks." She walked out, head held high, even as Graham noticed the subtle tremble in her shoulders. He turned to Hensley, rage swelling. "You're making a mistake, Margaret. She's the only one who's helped my daughter." Hensley folded her arms. "She's a janitor, Graham, not a doctor. What right does she have here? We can't allow an unlicensed person to treat patients, especially your daughter." Graham wanted to shout, to slam his fist on the table, but he knew she was technically right. He had looked the other way because of the results, but now the rules were turning against him. He rushed down the hall, but Amara was gone. He raced down the stairs and out the main entrance, where a swarm of reporters buzzed like hornets. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust in his face. "Mr. Wexler, is it true you hired a janitor to treat your daughter? Is she a fraud or a miracle worker?" Graham ignored them, pushing through the crowd. But Amara was nowhere to be found. He stood on the street, breath short, overwhelmed by a helplessness he hadn't felt in years. When he returned to Lily's room, she was in her wheelchair, staring out the window. A nurse told him Amara had come to say goodbye, but hadn't said why. Lily turned toward him, eyes red. "Where's Miss Amara?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She said I'm the bravest girl she's ever met. She's my fairy godmother." Graham knelt beside her, took her hand, but had no words. His chest ached with something sharp and unfamiliar. He had let Amara go, Not because he wanted to, but because he hesitated, because he let doubt win. He held Lily close, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. "I'll find her," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he could. "I promise." And in the quiet of the hospital room, Graham realized he had lost something. Not just Amara, but the belief that he could fix everything. For the first time, he understood. There are things money cannot buy, like faith, like redemption, like a second chance. The pale morning sunlight filtered through the hospital room's curtains, casting soft streaks across Lily's pale face. She sat in her wheelchair, arms tightly wrapped around her stuffed bunny, eyes fixed on the floor. Ever since Amara left 3 days ago, she had barely spoken. Physical therapy sessions with the new doctor, someone with an impressive resume handpicked by the hospital, only made her retreat further. "I don't want to," Lily would mumble every time she was asked to practice, and no one, not even Graham, could get her to change her mind. Graham stood by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes weighed down with guilt. He was used to fixing problems, acquiring rival companies, firing underperformers, paying off scandals. But this time, he was powerless. Amara had disappeared without a trace. He had contacted everyone in the hospital, even hired a private investigator. But it was as if she had vanished from Manhattan. Every time he looked at Lily, he felt the knife twist deeper. He had let the one person who gave his daughter hope slip away. "Lily," Graham said softly, his voice thick with effort, "do you want something to eat? I can order your favorite." Lily didn't look up. "I'm not hungry," she murmured, so quietly he barely heard her. Graham walked over, kneeling beside her wheelchair, trying to meet her eyes. "Sweetheart, I know you miss Miss Amara. I'm trying to find her, but you have to be strong, okay? For me." Lily turned her face away, a tear sliding down her cheek. "You always say you can do anything," she whispered, "but you didn't keep Miss Amara. You let her go, just like you let Mommy go." Her words sliced through him. Graham froze, breath stolen from his lungs. He had rarely spoken about his late wife, Clara, who had died of cancer when Lily was only 3. He thought he had hidden that grief behind boardrooms, mergers, and meetings. But Lily, even as a child, had seen it all. His absence, the times he chose deadlines over holding her close. He reached for her hand, and his own trembled. "I was wrong," he choked out. "I was wrong not to be there. I was wrong to let Amara go. His voice cracked, tears spilling freely, for the first time in front of his daughter. "I don't want to lose you, Lily. I can't." Lily looked at him, her red eyes no longer distant. She placed her small, cold hand over his. "Don't give up like you did before," she said, her voice shaking. "Miss Amara believed I could walk. You have to believe it too." Graham pulled her into his arms, feeling her tiny frame press against his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a billionaire or a CEO. He was just a father. And the only thing that mattered was the little girl in his arms. He realized he had used money to replace emotion, to bury the pain of losing Clara, of nearly losing Lily. But Amara had changed that. She hadn't just helped Lily stand. She had made Graham confront who he really was. "I won't give up," he whispered into her hair. "I promise." After Lily fell asleep, Graham remained in the room, phone in hand. He called David, his assistant, his voice sharper than ever. "Find Amara Lynn. I don't care what it takes. Turn New York upside down. And investigate Paul Carver. I want to know why he really went after her." David hesitated. "Sir, the media is still in a frenzy. If you bring Miss Lynn back, this could explode. Are you sure?" Graham looked at Lily, who slept with a faint smile on her face. "I've never been more sure. Do it." The next morning, Graham spent the entire morning with Lily, for the first time without checking emails or answering calls. He pushed her wheelchair into the hospital's small garden, where cherry blossoms were blooming early. He told her stories about when he and her mother were young, about the time Clara taught him how to waltz, and they both fell flat on the floor. Lily laughed, the sound like wind chimes stirring something long forgotten in his heart. "I want to try standing again," Lily said suddenly, as they stopped near a bench. "Like Miss Amara showed me." Graham hesitated, afraid to see her hurt. But the determination in Lily's eyes made him nod. He helped her up, steadying her hands, guiding her the way he remembered Amara doing. Breathe in, Lily. Pretend you're standing on the beach, waves touching your feet. Lily gripped his hands, her face tense with focus. She couldn't stand, but her toes moved, twitching faintly, a whisper of what Amara had begun. Graham smiled, tears welling again. You did great, he said. Miss Amara would be so proud of you. Back in her room, Graham felt a new resolve take root. He didn't just want to find Amara for Lily. He wanted to find her for himself, to right a wrong, to prove he was more than a man who hid behind power and wealth. He opened his laptop and began reviewing old files from St. Luke's, digging through the lawsuit from 5 years ago. If Amara had been wrongly blamed, he would clear her name, not for the press, but for justice and for his daughter. Somewhere in the city, Amara was probably helping someone else, quietly, patiently, just as she had helped Lily. Graham didn't know where she was, but he swore this time he wouldn't let her disappear. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Rain poured down on Manhattan like a silver curtain, turning the streets into glimmering rivers beneath neon light. Inside a black SUV, Graham Wexler sat still, his expensive coat soaked, eyes fixed on the crumbling tenement in front of him. Through the fog glass, he saw rusted tin roofs, flaking walls, and shadows moving quietly beneath flickering street lamps. This was the last place he'd expected to find Amara Lynn, a rundown district on the edge of Queens, far from the sanitized luxury of the Manhattan hospital. It had been a week since Amara's dismissal. Graham had turned over every stone, hospital staff, community centers, even his private investigator, only to come up empty. Finally, a lead. A social worker mentioned a young woman who occasionally helped homeless people recover from injuries in this area. No name, no address. But Graham knew it had to be Amara. He stepped out of the car, cold rain cutting through his cashmere coat like knives. His driver, a stocky man named Mike, moved to open an umbrella, but Graham waved him off. Stay here, he said firmly. Mike nodded, though his eyes betrayed concern. Graham walked down narrow alleys, shoes sinking into murky puddles. The rain drowned out all sound, except a quiet voice from somewhere ahead. Under a makeshift awning, Amara knelt beside a middle-aged man, his leg wrapped in a crude bandage. She wore a tattered hoodie, soaked hair clinging to her forehead, but her hands moved with familiar precision, gently massaging the man's swollen ankle. Easy, Tom, she said softly. Keep your legs straight. Tell me if the pain gets worse. Graham stopped a few yards away, suddenly feeling like an intruder. She wasn't just working, she was living here, among the forgotten, where no one asked about licenses or past mistakes. Tom smiled faintly, murmured something that made Amara laugh. Genuine, unguarded. Graham had never seen her laugh like that, but the moment vanished as she looked up and saw him. Her eyes narrowed, not in surprise, but in caution. Mr. Wexler, she said, standing and wiping her hands on her sleeve. You shouldn't be here. Graham stepped closer, rain streaming down his face. I had to find you, he said, his voice hoarse from cold and emotion. Lily needs you. I need you. Amara crossed her arms, her gaze hard. Lily needed me until you let them throw me out. And now? You want me to come back so the press can have another field day? The janitor who fooled the billionaire. That'll be tomorrow's headline. Her words were sharp, but Graham didn't retreat. He dropped to his knees in the water, his expensive pants instantly soaked. I was wrong, he said, voice shaking. I hesitated. I let doubt blind me. But I know now. You're the only one who can help her. Please, Amara, come back. Tom watched wide-eyed, but Amara didn't move. She looked at Graham as if weighing not his words, but the man behind them. The rain poured between them, silencing everything but their breath. At last she spoke, her voice low and steady. I'll come back, but not for you, and not for your money, for Lily. She paused, her eyes sharp. And this time, no one gets to erase me again. If you want my help, you help me, clear my name. Prove what happened at St. Luke wasn't my fault. Graham nodded without hesitation. I swear, he said, I'll find the truth. I'll give you back everything you deserve. She stared at him a moment longer, then turned to Tom with a soft smile. Rest, Tom. I'll check your leg later. She picked up her now drenched cloth bag and gestured toward the street. Let's go. If you came all the way here, you're not making me walk back in the rain. They walked silently to the SUV. Mike opened the door, clearly curious, but said nothing. As the vehicle pulled away, Graham looked at Amara, seated beside him, hair still dripping. What were you doing out here, he asked. Helping these people. Why? Amara stared out the window, her voice quiet but firm. Because no one else will. And because I know what it feels like to be left behind. Graham didn't respond. He felt something deep shift inside him. Part admiration, part shame. He had destroyed her life, if only indirectly. Now he owed her far more than just gratitude. He owed her truth. When they arrived at a modest motel, Amara opened the door. I need time to get ready, she said. I'll come to the hospital tomorrow. But you'd better keep your word, Mr. Wexler. Not for me, for Lily. Graham nodded. I will. You have my word. She stepped out into the rain, her figure disappearing into the mist. Graham sat in silence, feeling as though he had just crossed a threshold he could never undo. He pulled out his phone and called David. Dig up everything about the St. Luke's case, he ordered. Every email, every internal memo, and get the legal team ready. We're reopening this case. He hung up, watching the rain wash over the windshield. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting for his daughter. He was fighting for a woman who reminded him that hope can't be bought. It must be earned. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks inside the press room of Manhattan General, turning the space into a blinding sea of light. Graham Wexler stood behind the podium, his charcoal gray suit perfectly tailored, his expression sharp as steel, like a man about to enter the final battle of his life. Before him, dozens of reporters, microphones held aloft, cameras broadcasting live. Beside him stood Amara Lynn, quiet and composed in a simple gray shirt and pants, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't look at the crowd, only at Lily, seated in her wheelchair in the front row, her wide eyes shining as they locked with Amara's. 1 week earlier, Graham had brought Amara back to the hospital, despite whispers from staff and skeptical glances from the board. He had worked relentlessly, side by side with Wexler Tech's legal team, to reopen the long-buried case from St. Luke's. What they uncovered shook him to the core. A suppressed internal report revealing that the lead surgeon, not Amara, had ignored early signs of infection in the patient. Amara, then a research assistant, had raised the alarm but was dismissed. She became the scapegoat to preserve the hospital's image and Wexler Tech's financial interests. Graham cleared his throat, his eyes sweeping across the room. Thank you for coming today, he began, his voice calm but resonant. I'm not standing here today as the CEO of Wexler Tech. I'm standing here as a father. My daughter Lily lost her ability to walk after a tragic accident. The world's best doctors told us hope was gone. But one person changed everything, Amara Lynn. A murmur rippled through the room. A reporter raised a hand, but Graham continued without pause. She's not a licensed doctor. She doesn't wear a white coat. But she possesses a gift, a resilience, and most importantly, a belief in my daughter that no one else had. Today isn't just about Lily's progress. It's about justice for a woman whose future was stolen. He stopped, motioning to David, who began distributing thick folders to the media. 5 years ago, Amara Lynn was wrongly blamed for a patient's death during spinal surgery at St. Luke's Hospital. The truth is, she was innocent. This report, buried by my own company, proves the lead surgeon made a fatal error. Amara raised the alarm and was ignored, and then silenced. His voice broke slightly. I'm here to make that right. Chaos erupted. Shouts from the press. Mr. Wexler, are you admitting corporate cover-up? Is Miss Lynn planning to sue the hospital? Amara stood still, but Graham noticed her hands trembling. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of quiet assurance. She doesn't want money or fame, Graham said firmly. She wants to help people, people like my daughter. And today, you'll see exactly what that means. He turned to Lily, offering a smile. Are you ready, sweetheart? Lily nodded, gripping Amara's hand as she approached. The room fell silent. Amara knelt beside her, whispered something only Lily could hear, then gently helped her up. Lily held on to a set of parallel bars positioned on stage, her legs shaking, but her eyes unwavering. "Breathe in," Amara said softly. "Picture the waves brushing your feet." Lily took a step, then another, small, trembling, but undeniable. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the space. Cameras clicked nonstop. Some reporters wept openly. Graham stood frozen, throat tight with emotion. He knelt beside Lily as she returned to her wheelchair, his voice barely audible. "You make me so proud." He turned to Amara, his gaze softer than it had ever been. "You didn't just save her," he said. "You saved me too." The crowd kept applauding, but Amara only gave a small nod, eyes gleaming. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken loud enough. Later, in a private office, Graham faced Amara again, this time with a different kind of proposal. "I want you to lead a new rehabilitation center," he said, "named after Lily, the Lily Hope Center, for children who don't have access to care. Will you take it?" Amara looked at him, then smiled, for the first time truly. "I will," she said, "but not for you, not for the center, for kids like Lily." Graham nodded, the weight in his chest finally beginning to lift. He knew the journey wasn't over. There were still unanswered questions, unresolved wounds, and a future yet to be built. But for the first time, he believed everything might just be okay. Not because of wealth or influence, but because of people like Amara Lynn, people who never gave up. As he left the office and saw Lily being wheeled down the hall, her laughter echoing behind him, Graham felt something rise in his chest. Not just hope, but redemption. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. 1 year had passed since the press conference that shook Manhattan General. Spring had returned to New York, dressing the city in a soft green glow as sunlight filtered through the trees on the grounds of Lily's new school. Now 11, Lily ran across the yard with her friends, curly brown hair bouncing as she laughed, the wheelchair long gone, though on tough days she still relied on support bars. Her laughter, bright as wind chimes, drifted across the field and made Graham Wexler, watching from the fence, smile with quiet awe. Gone was the stiff, suit-clad CEO. Today, Graham stood with rolled-up sleeves and a relaxed posture. He had changed, not just in how he saw Lily, but how he saw the world. Wexler Tech remained his empire, but his heart belonged elsewhere now. The Lily Hope Center, the rehab facility he had built with Amara Lynn as its director. He remembered opening day when Lily, hands trembling but eyes shining, cut the ribbon herself. Amara was now a recognized name, not for chasing headlines, but for the lives she touched. She spoke at conferences and universities, sharing her integrative approach to healing body and spirit. But she still wore her gray t-shirts and loose pants, still knelt beside trembling children, still wrote meticulous notes in her tattered notebook. Once Graham had asked why she didn't wear a white coat now that her name had been cleared. "I don't need it," she'd said with a soft smile. "Kids don't care what I wear. They care if I believe in them." Today, like many days, Graham and Amara came together to pick up Lily after school. They never put a label on their relationship, never made an announcement, never needed to. But anyone could see it in Graham's gaze. Admiration, gratitude, and something deeper he had never dared to name. They walked side by side through the park near the school, Lily chasing a butterfly ahead of them. Amara strolled slowly beside him, her fabric bag swaying at her side. "She's stronger than I ever imagined," Amara said, eyes following Lily. "Not just her body, her soul. It's healing." Graham nodded, his voice husky. "Because of you. Not just Lily. Me too." He paused, searching for the words. "I used to think I didn't need anyone. That money could solve everything. You proved me wrong." Amara turned to him, her gaze both warm and razor sharp. "You weren't entirely wrong," she said. "Your money built the center. It helped dozens of kids, but you chose to use it right. That's what matters." They sat on a wooden bench watching Lily twirl in the sun. Graham inhaled deeply, as if preparing for a high-stakes negotiation. "Amara," he said, voice low, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. St. Luke, I didn't know you then, but I was part of it. I signed the papers. I enabled the lie. Can you forgive the man who helped destroy your future?" Amara was quiet. A breeze stirred the scent of cherry blossoms in the air. Finally, she looked back at him, eyes steady. "You didn't destroy my future, Graham," she said. "You gave me the reason to rebuild it. Without St. Luke, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met Lily. I wouldn't have started over. I don't forgive you because I never blamed you." Her words were like light breaking through storm clouds. Graham took her hand for the first time, feeling the warmth in those healer's fingers. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he whispered, "and I don't want to do this alone anymore. The center, life, all of it. What do you think?" Amara's smile was playful and sincere. "I think you need to work on your romantic delivery," she teased, making him laugh. "But I'll be here, Graham, for Lily, for the center, and maybe for you." Lily came bounding back, grabbing both their hands. "Dad, Miss Amara, let's go get ice cream," she cried, tugging them toward the truck nearby. Graham and Amara stood, hands still gently linked, unwilling to let go of something so fragile, so precious. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire, Graham felt a peace he had never known. He looked at Lily, at Amara, and realized this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a family, a mission, and a man who had finally come home to his heart. The grand opening of the Lily Hope Center unfolded beneath a flawless blue Manhattan sky, with sunlight streaming through the trees of Central Park. The center itself, a sleek, glass-lined building surrounded by a lush healing garden, stood as the realization of a shared dream between Graham Wexler and Amara Lynn. Hundreds had gathered, former patients, families, healthcare workers, and the children whose lives Amara had helped transform. Laughter and soft music floated through the air, blending with the scent of fresh flowers and pastries from the nearby buffet. Lily, now confident and radiant, stood on a small stage set among the garden beds. She wore a white dress with her signature brown curls tied back in a ribbon, gripping a small piece of paper in her hand. Graham and Amara stood behind her, close but not touching, their eyes filled with a quiet, profound pride. Graham, in a crisp white shirt and light gray blazer, looked like a man reborn. Amara, true to herself, wore her usual gray tee and trousers, fingers laced tightly together to steady her emotions. Lily took a deep breath. Her voice, though trembling, rang clearly through the microphone. "I used to think I'd never walk again," she began. The crowd fell silent. "I was scared. I thought everything was over. But then Miss Amara came. She didn't just teach me how to walk. She taught me how to believe in myself. And my dad—" She turned to Graham, her eyes sparkling. "He believed when no one else did. He and Miss Amara gave me something more than healing. They gave me a family." The crowd erupted into applause. Some wiped tears, others rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Graham's throat tightened. He stepped forward and hugged Lily tightly, whispering, "You are my greatest pride." She clung to him, then reached for Amara, pulling her into the embrace. And for a moment, the three of them stood there, saying everything without a word. After Lily left the stage to join her friends, Graham led Amara to a quiet corner of the garden, beneath blooming cherry trees. The scent of blossoms filled the air, and the music faded into a distant hum. Graham stopped, turned to Amara, and looked at her with a softness that felt new and deeply certain. "Amara," he began, his voice low, "I used to be a lonely man. I had wealth, power, but no one truly by my side. I thought I didn't need anyone, until you and Lily came along." He paused, taking a breath as if mustering courage. "You didn't just heal Lily, you healed my heart, and I don't want to live another day without you." Amara looked up, her eyes shimmering, surprised, overwhelmed. She opened her mouth, but Graham lifted a hand to stop her. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. Etched into its surface was the delicate imprint of Lily's hand, a symbol of everything they had been through together. "Please, Amara," he said, voice unsteady, "don't just heal my heart. Keep it. Forever." Tears slid down Amara's cheeks, but her smile shone brighter than ever. She reached out, touching the ring, then looked into his eyes. "This time," she whispered, "I'm not leaving." Graham slipped the ring onto her finger just as Lily came running toward them, her voice ringing out. "Miss Amara! Dad!" she squealed, leaping into their arms. Nearby, applause broke out. Whether for the proposal or the ceremony, no one knew. But Graham didn't care. He held Amara and Lily close, as if the world had narrowed to just them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in golden pinks, Amara rested her head on Graham's shoulder, her hand interwoven with his. Lily danced around the garden, pointing at flowers and laughing freely. "We did it, Graham," Amara whispered. "Not just the center. We built a family." Graham kissed her forehead, his voice soft as wind. "And this is only the first step." 2 years later, the summer sun poured into a small, cozy house on the outskirts of New York, where Graham and Amara had made their home. Their wedding had been quiet but warm, held in the garden of the Lily Hope Center. Only Lily, a few close friends, and the gentle sound of a string quartet were there to witness it. Lily, no longer needing her support frame, tossed petals with joy, calling Amara Mom for the first time. On Amara's hand, the silver ring with Lily's handprint still sparkled, now accompanied by a plain wedding band. That morning in their sunlit living room, Amara sat curled in a chair, holding a 6-month-old baby girl, Clara Lynn Wexler, named after Graham's late wife. Clara had Lily's wide brown eyes and Amara's mischievous grin. Lily, now the proud big sister, knelt beside her, tickling her baby sister with the old stuffed bunny. "Clara, look!" she giggled as the baby cooed and squealed with delight. Graham stood at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, watching them with a happiness he never thought he'd know. Amara looked up and caught his gaze, smiling. "What are you doing over there?" she teased. "Come here, dad of 2 princesses." He crossed the room, sat beside her on the floor, and pulled Lily into his arms, kissing Clara's forehead. "I was just thinking," he said, voice rough with love, "that I must be the luckiest man in the world." Amara rested her head against his, her hand finding his again. And in that moment, as laughter filled the house and baby Clara gurgled happily, they knew, no matter how the world outside might change, this home, filled with Lily's joy, Clara's wonder, and the love they'd fought so hard for, would always be the place where all wounds healed, and where love began its truest journey.